Welcome viewers. Our guest today is Mr. Jeff Richert, a community member of our Peace region. Thank you, Jeff, for coming to our program.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. You are running as an independent MLA candidate. Please tell us about your professional background.
Well, I'm starting on the education side. I have a degree in natural resource science from TRU in Kamloops. I have a technical diploma in forestry from BCIT and also a graduate certificate in project management. And as I've gone through my 20s and into my 30s now, I've had quite a diversified background of work experience. I've worked in the forest industry in cut block and road layout, in silviculture. I've worked in oil and gas as a welder's helper and dealing with hallmark tubulars in Alberta, which is casing for drill rigs. Also, I've worked as an environmental scientist in environmental consulting, and I did a couple years stint in tourism as a fly fishing guide. I'm also a professional biologist and a professional agrologist. So, I tell people I have quite a diverse background of experience.
Great, excellent. So, also please tell us what roles you have played as a community member in our Peace region.
So, I am a victim of my circumstance, which is I have a wife who is a very dedicated teacher and very active in the community, volunteering herself. So my role over the years and with my wife has been supporting her and volunteering through her via support. So she's been very active with the Canadian Cancer Society, Relay for Life, the Northern Lights Youth Choir and the Adult Choir. And I've spent a lot of my time focusing on running the household, but also supporting my wife through her volunteer activities. I also did some on-ice helping for minor hockey up here, which I really enjoyed.
Great, thank you. And other than this, please tell us, what is your motivation to run for this position?
I'm going to be honest, my motivation was frustration. So I moved up to the Peace region in 2010, and I grew up in the Lower Mainland. And 22 years in the Lower Mainland, I realized something was wrong. And I never really knew it growing up as a kid. And I realized that I was a small town guy. And as I went through university and traveled all over British Columbia and living in different places, we ended up settling here. My wife was from here originally. And the reality that Vancouver, the South, Vancouver and Victoria, have no idea about the Peace region, to be honest, and don't really care. As I've lived here and since I moved up, it's treated like the outpost, kind of. And then in 2010, when I moved up here, I saw what was going on and all the industrial activity and wondered how much money was actually leaving the region and what we were getting back. And so, the story of jobs, and jobs are a good thing, but I kept thinking to myself over the years, well, what else is there? There's a lot of extraction going on and a lot of money disappearing to Victoria and Calgary. And so as time went on, I started researching a lot of this, and I started, questioning the Peace region's role in British Columbia. And I think it plays a very important role, but I think it's also treated, cast off to the side as an outpost. And it's that frustration that made me realize, that maybe I should go into politics. And it was actually my wife who said, Jeff, if you're really, if this is an important issue for you, and if you're that frustrated, why don't you focus it into something positive? And so that's really the primary, factor for me running is I'd like to see a change up here in the Peace region, and I'd like to be a part of that.
Right. And please tell us, in general, how do you consider our region to be rich in terms of natural resources?
Well, I think the very interesting thing about the Peace region is its diversity, especially from a resource perspective. So you have forest industry, oil and gas, agriculture, hydroelectric development as examples. But I think that richness doesn't translate necessarily to the services and infrastructure side of our society up here. I think, it was recently I heard a number, it was $20 billion in extraction and, in royalties, et cetera, since 2005. But at the same time, we have approximately 300 seniors in this town that require care, various forms of care. And that's not including seniors right now who are leading up to a state in their lives where they require a similar amount of care. And, seeing infrastructure and seeing the, for me, I don't see the benefit apart from jobs. I'm not buying that that argument. And so I think this region is very rich in resources, but on the flip side, I'm not seeing the equitable benefits of that extraction apart from jobs.
And what do you think are the main problems faced by our region currently?
I think fundamentally in the Peace region, we're taking our marching orders from Victoria. Now, I understand the political system. I understand that British Columbia is a top-down management structure politically. You vote in the party, they have their leader, and they give their direction. I do not believe for a second, as a former resident of the Lower Mainland, that Victoria, Vancouver, etc., the South, has any idea what's best for the Peace region. I believe that Peace region residents know exactly what we should be doing up here and what's good for the Peace region and British Columbia, by extension. And so I think moving forward that we need an advocate politically. We need somebody who's raising the awareness of the Peace region and what we're all about and help government make better and more informed decisions moving forward.
And what would be your solutions to these problems?
Well, I think from a political perspective, I'm of the view that if I was elected as MLA, I would put forth a process of consultation and engagement, a boots on the ground approach, because I think, talking to many people as you can and getting a good understanding of the issues, I do believe, and I've heard from a lot of people, that there's some wonderful solutions out there that I just don't see them getting up this top-down structure that we're dealing with. And I think that's the role of the MLA, is to work hard, be very in touch with the residents, industry, and regional districts, et cetera, and then help form and bridge those gaps to get those cost-effective, practical solutions. I also think that we have a very established oil and gas industry here, but for some reason we're not allowed to use the gas ourselves to generate electricity. And something that's really disappointed me over the years is how, we have this LNG scheme, which doesn't seem to be playing out nearly what anybody thought or was promised. But at the same time, we're prevented from using that gas to generate electricity. So we have a dam like Site C going in, good for short-term construction jobs. I'm not arguing that, but that's where the benefits of that project stops, to be honest. There's a lot of financial risk. And one thing that's really bothered me is why we're not using natural gas to generate electricity. We can meet our energy needs in an incremental approach, but at the same time, we don't have that risk to the ratepayer. And something that's concerned me a lot is how rate increases are affecting people on fixed incomes. I think it's a very serious issue. And given our unemployment rate in the Peace region right now, that's a live issue. There's a lot of people that are struggling, and I'm concerned about some of these decisions coming out of Victoria impacting a lot of people negatively.
And there is a saying, a politician thinks of the next election, a statesman thinks of the next generation. What do you think of, sir?
Well, I think I want to be an advocate, and I'm worried about tomorrow because the problems of yesterday are still unresolved. And one of my frustrations with politics in British Columbia is it turns into this party versus party fight. It's like kids in a sandbox, and I'm tired of it. And I think politicians are always focusing on re-election, these 4-year terms. We're dealing with issues that require immediate, addressing them immediately, like the seniors issue I brought up. I think that needs to be dealt with now. And so, when I hear that, I say, no, we have problems that we dealt with yesterday. We're dealing with them today, and we need them dealt with tomorrow. And I think, this immediacy and focusing on immediacy and being proactive and not so reactive is really what this is all about.
And in your opinion, does modern technology owe ecology an apology?
I love that question. I think a few years back we would have said so. We said yes. But I think, and when I put on my biologist hat, I think we are at an amazing point in time where we're able, with sensing technology, remote sensing, satellite, GPS, etc., that we can gather an amazing amounts of data, and we have the analytical capacity now with our computing power to be able to really make informed decisions. So I actually think ecology is going to thank technology moving forward. An example is, they're using drones now to monitor wildlife populations. A very, before it was a more invasive technique. We're able to get up and watch things and analyze and run computer modeling and stuff that's going to help us. So yeah, I actually think ecology will end up saying, thank you, technology, in the end.
Great, thank you. And how would you like to support the First Nation communities of our region?
I think it's important to honor the treaty. I'm going to be honest with you, I work for 2 First Nations currently, and I am not impressed with how the government has treated them and the Treaty 8 First Nations in general. That's based on 5.5 years of experience right now. I think the government takes a confrontational approach. I don't see a lot of meaningful consultation and engagement, and that's my opinion. And I think in order to help Treaty 8 First Nations, I think there's a lot of potential to bridge a lot of the gaps working with the cities, regional districts, and regional municipalities. And there's some special interest groups as well that could create quite a powerful force up here for changing policy that's beneficial to everyone. I'm going to be honest with you, when working with First Nations, I call it the 4 Ds. And when an issue is raised, it's the answer is defer, deflect, delay, and deny. And I think I'd like to see a reset with government and actually start relationships with First Nations based on respect and honoring the treaty.
And how do you think our healthcare system could be improved further?
I don't have an answer to that question. I would love to, but I've been going around asking people what they think should be done with healthcare. It's very important to everybody. It's very costly. And I have heard silence. And to be honest with you, when I looked at some demographics of Canada and BC, I've looked at the cost of healthcare in British Columbia, and it was rising 5% annually for a time there. That becomes very expensive 10, 20 years from now. And I think I would like to hear from healthcare practitioners and people in the system, because it's just this philosophy that I'm trying to tell people. I think a lot of the solutions are in the system, and it's getting those ideas out and channeling properly to affect policy, because I'm very concerned about the long-term sustainability of healthcare in British Columbia from a cost perspective. What I have read about is the focus on prevention. It seems like our system, fentanyl issue, for example, right? This fentanyl crisis, there was a lot of people raising those alarms years ago. No, it was silence. And now we're running into, it's turned into a crisis. And part of me, and call me an idealist, I would love to see our medical system transform into something that's focused on prevention. Another concern for me is this mental health crisis that's going on in our society. It affects everybody. And I don't see meaningful steps to address preventative medicine for people that need help as well, in that aspect. So I'm not going to sit here and say I have answers to all the questions. I think on healthcare, it's a very important topic. It impacts everybody, and I think we should see a government focusing on prevention, to be honest. And I am open, if there's anyone out there that wants to give me ideas or whatever, I'm more than willing, because it is something that does concern me.
Thank you. And what's your interpretation of peace, order, and good government?
Peace, order, and good government. Well, it's a foundational statement in Commonwealth. I looked it up, and in Commonwealth countries. And peace and order, respecting the rule of law. Good government? Now, isn't that an interesting statement? What I would like to say, one of the other reasons why I'm running is quite simply, is good government include politicians lying to get elected? And we've seen it in the last provincial election on the LNG, 100,000 jobs, debt-free BC, prosperity fund that they took 100 million of our money to put into. It didn't come from any revenues. And then we saw it with the federal election, and most recently with Trudeau about electoral reform. Oh, he all made all these statements about how they were going to, reform the Canadian electoral system and proportional representation, and backed right off. And I think when it comes to good government, it starts with politicians being truthful and honest and admitting when they don't have an answer to an issue. and showing people that they actually truly want to work to find those answers. So good government for me starts with politicians not lying to get elected.
And if you become the Prime Minister of Canada for one day, what would you like to accomplish that day?
Well, I'm going to be selfish. One thing that really bothers me from a federal government perspective is the Hockey Night in Canada song. I want it nationalized. I want it purchased by the Canadian government, and the rights for anybody broadcasting a hockey game at any time can use that song. I'm of the view that that song is so ingrained in Canadian culture, my generation, the preceding generation, that that should be public property and for use of anybody. So my first day as Prime Minister would be to purchase that song and allow it to be used by anybody in the country.
Thank you. And will you also send Peace Region $1 billion check that day?
No. I would take $1 billion and I would put it towards, meaningful measures to address the second largest child poverty rate in Canada, which would be British Columbia. So sorry, Peace Region, if I had $1 billion, I would do it to help the children of BC.
And who are role models to you?
There's been so many. It's interesting when you become an adult and you think about that question and you go, who's influenced me from a role model perspective? My parents, absolutely. Good and bad. That's the wonderful thing of becoming an adult, is you realize how much influence your parents have on you. My parents, absolutely. My wife is with her, how passionate of a teacher is and how much she cares about those kids, absolutely a role model for me. Professionally, I worked with a guy named Woody, that was his nickname, and he was a squeaky wheel type of person, eh? He's always had something to say, and sometimes it got him in trouble, but Woody taught me a very valuable lesson that maybe pushed me down this road wanting to get into politics, and that is question everything. Don't just listen and accept. And when you ask the question why, and people can't answer that, there's a problem. Something as simple as the question why. Why are you doing this? It shows you, it opens up those doors to the truth. I think from a historical perspective, Amelia Earhart has always been somebody, it blew my mind what she did, what she tried to accomplish, circumnavigating the globe in the 1930s with that aerial technology. I thought for a role model, Amelia Earhart for women was an amazing individual, what she did and the guts she had. I wouldn't do that. And from a BC historical perspective, Roderick Haig Brown. He was a visionary. He understood a long time ago that, sustainability was the answer. And we're seeing, in BC, the exploitation of resources does cause a lot of problems that maybe we need to adjust in a way that balances the issues. And interesting about Roderick Haig Brown is before I started reading about him, I didn't realize that me and him caught our first steelhead in the same river, actually, in the Heber. So, there's some examples of role models in my life.
And finally, Jeff, what's your message for our peace community?
My message for the peace community is May 9th, you have a choice. And, on May 9th, you have an option who is me, who's willing to be an advocate for you, who's willing to get, roll up my sleeves and get boots on the ground and start addressing those issues in a meaningful manner and bring a fresh voice and a fresh perspective to Peace Region politics. I want to be your advocate, and if that's what you think you need, vote for me.
Thank you for coming to our program, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.